And I'm going to hand over to Hilary Hodgson, who's going to actually interview, instead of me doing some laborious pitch on behalf of Classics for All, we thought it was much more fun to hear from Hilary interviewing Lidia Kuhivchak, who's actually one of our teachers who's out there doing the great work of Classics for All. So Hilary, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. And Mary, you are an intensely hard act to follow. So, and for those of you who are, we've got an international audience, so I'm going to give a very wee introduction, talk for 10 minutes, a few questions that will come through Jimmy, but feel free to leave if we're the pudding rather than the sweet. For those of you who don't know about Classics for All, we've been going for 10 years. And in this time, we've trained 3,000 teachers from state secondary schools and primary schools in the UK, that is non-fee paying schools, to teach classics, in part because there's a shortage of classics teachers in this country. Many of the schools we work in are in areas of socio-economic disadvantage, which belies the fact that many people see classics as an elitist pursuit. We do this because we really profoundly believe that pupils of all abilities and from all backgrounds should get access to what Mary described as this fantastically interdisciplinary culture that classics is, whether it's the Odyssey, whether it's Persia or Latin or Greek language. And we're supported in our work by individual donors and trusts and foundations. The schools we work with don't pay a penny. And we also have massive help from 17 regional networks that are often based at top universities in the UK, who support us with training and advice. And everything we do is for free. I'm delighted, quick introduction, to be joined by Lidia Kuhivchak, who's an English and classics teacher who works with our Leicester network and teaches at a school, a non-fee paying school, state school called Beauchamp College, which is part of the Lionheart Trust. And since 2014, 65 schools in Leicester have introduced classics, many on the curriculum, not just as an extracurricular activity. And at Beauchamp, Lydia is a star, and she's worked as an ambassador. She's got classics off the ground in her own school and 4 other secondary schools, as well as 4 local primary schools. During this brief chat, if you want to put a couple of questions in the Q&A, you're welcome. And by all means, email us if you want to leave and follow up afterwards. So Lydia, just to start off, I mean, you're a fascinating creature, but where did your passion for classics come from? Because you've got a very interesting backstory.
Yeah, I really liked it when Mary said that she liked classics because she was good at it. I think that's definitely part of my own story in kind of getting to where I was. But I think for me, Classics for All has been so important because I was one of those students who went to a state school and got a little bit of classics after school, thought, oh, this is great. Maybe I ought to do this more. But I went to the open days and I sat there and I looked around the room, and coming from Leicester and from a state school, I just thought, I don't know if this is for me, actually. I don't know if these are the people I want to study with. So I went off and did English, which seemed a lot more kind of democratic and maybe would have different kinds of people in it and teaching it. And about halfway through my first year, I thought, you know what? I do actually want to give classics a go. And I asked my tutor if I could do some ancient Greek. And she said, that's a terrible idea. You'll fail. You've never done Greek before. And of course, as an 18-year-old, you think, right, I'm going to prove this teacher wrong. So I took ancient Greek from scratch, which, you know, I'd never done anything like that before. You know, I had to toddle off to the library with my Greek lexicon and try and figure out the grammar. And came out at the end of 2 years, scraping a 2-1, which I could wave in my tutor's face and say, I did Greek, I passed. And from there, I thought, actually, I ought to carry on with this. So what do I do? And I applied for scholarships, again, because, you know, you think, well, who's going to let me do what I want? And I went off to Yale University, who are incredibly generous with their money. I got a fellowship and I went to study with the wonderful Emily Greenwood at Yale. And she was the person who made me feel like I could be a classicist, actually, because until then I think I'd felt, oh, I'm just pretending, you know. I can.
Yeah. So you felt a little bit like a fake sometimes, but you got there at the end. But in terms of your teaching, and you're a born and a dyed-in-the-wool teacher, why do you think, given your experience, that all pupils, regardless of background, ability, should have access to classics, especially in the UK, where the tradition is quite an independent school one?
And we do have a problem in this country. We've got a big divide between state and private schools. And I think it's an issue of fairness. You know, if somebody else gets to study it, why can't I? And I remember feeling that really passionately as a student myself, as a teenager. You know, why did they get to have that? Why can't I have that?
Mm-hmm.
And why do I have to do it after school? Why can't I do it on the timetable? Why can't I have as many hours as I want? And I wanted to feel like all my students would have the opportunity to make the choice. They don't all have to pick it, but they should have the chance to do it. And you know, I think for me, that's been a huge driver in making sure we not only offer qualifications, but that we start as early as possible, because research shows that the younger a student is when they're exposed to something, the less intimidating they're going to find it. So
it could, some people might say, you know, you're foisting it upon them. I mean, what do kids in Leicester get out of it? So you know, have you proof that they actually like it, whatever their background? Or not all of them will, but you know,
they love it. They love, like all children, they love the stories. You know, let's do of it. Let's do these wild and bizarre myths. But in terms of language, I think we're at an advantage where we are, because so many of my students are bi or trilingual. You know, they speak Yoruba, they speak Gujarati, they read Arabic, they speak Hindi. And so actually the language isn't intimidating for them because they've already got a couple.
Yeah.
So it doesn't come with the baggage that I think we as older adults feel is attached to this stuff. For them, it's a skill, and they like skills. And once a student masters a skill, they're proud of themselves. So it's self-perpetuating, and they're able to tell the kids in the year below, I've got this and you can do it.
I mean, was it a battle to get, you started your work as this ambassador at Beauchamp College, where you currently teach. I mean, how did you persuade parents and the schools to get on board?
Partly the proof is just in the thing itself. You know, after school was popular, you know, kids wanted to come, they wanted to bring their friends. And we introduced the entry-level Latin certificates. And once you tell people a qualifications involved, suddenly senior leaders go, oh, that's great. You know, we can put that on the curriculum because it's real, it's something that we can touch. And trips, you know, everybody loves a trip. Let's all get on the coach, let's go to the British Museum, let's all get a picture in front of these bits of old stone and post it and show your parents. So there was no one solution, but you know, it's drip feeding over time. You know, first year we had a club after school, second year we had 2 clubs, third year we had time on the curriculum, and other schools suddenly started getting a bit jealous and going, oh, why can't we have that?
So there was a bit of a viral effect. Sorry, that's probably not, I shouldn't say that at the moment, should I? So it spread. So it spread from Beauchamp. So the next step was you got, I think, more secondary schools on board. Is that correct?
I got in my car and I drove to other schools to teach Latin. And that meant that once the kids had the opportunity, other teachers could take on the Latin. So I was, you know, I said, I can train you myself, or you can sit in the classroom and watch me. And after a year, you'll be able to teach this. It's been lovely to watch staff who teach science or English or history who've never done anything like that before suddenly realize, oh, actually I can learn a new skill even at my age and my stage in my career. So that's been really nice to watch, actually.
But it hasn't stopped with the secondary schools. I mean, you're on a kind of ineluctable trail towards classics heaven. So how has it developed since you got those secondary school on board?
Well, the secondary schools have been ticking along nicely. So the next phase was primary. So I offered them 45 minutes a week of my time and said, again, you know, if you want to kind of watch me and learn, you can. So we've now got 4 primary schools who start in year 3. So the kids are only 7. And at age 7, they're so enthusiastic. You know, they're so excited. One boy actually thought I was an ancient Roman. You know, after a couple of weeks, he said to me, pointed at the PowerPoint, he said, Miss, that's where you come from. And I said, no, but it's really nice that you think that. You know, they're so gripped by the idea of the ancient world, and they love what they just think of them as stories that, you know, happen to be with some slightly different words.
And best anecdote from a child in a classroom, Lydia? Anything you can think of?
Apart from my child who thought I was an ancient Roman, I want to do a special shout out because, unbeknownst to me, one of my former students is on this call. So our A-level class, which used to be just 3 kids after school for fun, we doubled the numbers. We got students to do the full A-level on timetable. And last year, 3 out of our 9 students got a place at Oxford or Cambridge to read a classics related subject, which is amazing. I was the only person in my year to go to Cambridge at all from school. I didn't know anybody else. So for that to happen for me personally is a huge achievement. So Martha's listening. She's going to go off to do English with classics next year. So
a huge shout out to Martha and to the engine for social mobility that classics can be. Lydia, that is fantastic. Now, I'm not going to, I know that people are kind of tuning in from a wide variety of countries and places, and we don't want to extend this too long, but we've probably got time because we've been magnificently quick for a few questions. If anyone wants to stay and ask either Lydia or myself any more questions about CFA or Lydia's work. Jimmy.
Actually, well, I was going to ask a question. Where do you see this ending? What's your ambition for this? I mean, how far? Because clearly you're a force of nature. And if only we had one of you in every part of the country, we'd be fine.
I'm building an empire, Jimmy. You know, I learned from the Romans.
Clearly.
Got to be thorough. So the next step for us is, I think, you know, we've got a group of 10 schools and that's one trust. So the next step is to start supporting other schools in the area.
Right.
Because, you know, we've got so many schools that could happily offer Latin if they had the expertise. Yeah. So it's to keep training teachers and keep also using the expertise from Leicester University, whom I should have mentioned earlier. They've been brilliant in offering support for us.
Yeah, I should actually chip in there and say that Leicester University have been the engine and the powerhouse behind people like Lydia, Sarah Scott and Jane Ainsworth, who, because of their very broad and diverse kind of widening participation agenda, have been absolutely stalwart in supporting this enormous achievement in that area.
I have a story. I sat in on a class in Liverpool, my hometown, in Anfield, with Alice, who kind of runs the hub up there, and we were sat there in the very first lesson the kids were having, which is an etymology lesson where the teacher was putting up Latin words up on the board, and the kids had to chip in with English words that kind of reminded them. And one word was Maximus, and this little kid next to me, this little, just like I used to be, this gingerhead scouser put his hand up. I said, Maximus. Yes, Tommy. What's an English word that reminds you of Maximus? He said, Pepsi Max, miss. And she was right. She absolutely endorsed it, saying, you're absolutely right. Big Pepsi. And honestly, the children were fantastic. It was one of the best hours I'd spent that year. It was so alive. You know, it wasn't, people talk about the classics as being dead subjects. It was the most alive hour I'd spent that year with anybody. It was so I can see how energizing it is, even though it must be also very time consuming and exhausting for you. But honestly, that was a fantastic talk. So thank you both very much. But I think we now have run over time, which is always a good time. So are we going to say goodbye, Hilary?
Yes, we're going to say goodbye. But if anyone wants to ask any more questions, you can file them to Classics for All at our email address, and we'll do our best to answer them.
Yes, and also if you're going to give us any money, which I'm sure you're desperate to give us, please go onto the website and find out how to do that. And I won't limit the amount that you give us. Just go mad. Okay, everybody. Thanks, Lydia. Thanks, Hilary. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.